Gregg, welcome to Montreal on this beautiful day of June 2012.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thrilled to be here.
The city of 1,001 festivals, the city of 1,001 crises, actually, right, these days. Let's start with Entanglement, the first Gregg Braden novel. You're a legend in the field of spiritual books, providing a bridge between easy to understand science and the wisdom traditions from the past. So it's very exciting to see a different kind of a novel. Gregg, can you tell us about it?
Sure. You know what? A lot of people, when they ask this question, the first thing they ask is how I made what they perceive as a leap from the world of science and technology into the most sacred and cherished traditions of our past, and the spiritual aspects of those traditions. And I guess for me, the first time I heard the question, I was surprised, because for me there was less of a leap and more of a progression. It makes perfect sense to explore our relationship to the world through the eyes of the masters and the wisdom of our past, and marry that with the best science of today, because both ways are approaches to understanding our relationship to one another, to ourselves, to the world around us, to our past. So the book Entanglement, or the novel Entanglement, actually is based upon the 2008 release of a book called The Divine Matrix.
Oh.
The Divine Matrix is the book. It was my answer to the question that has been asked so many times: are we connected to one another? Are we connected to the earth? Or, as modern science has asked us to believe, are we separate from one another? Are we separate from ourselves? Are we disconnected from our bodies? That's the question that so many people are asking right now. So in the Divine Matrix, what I showed was the science, the peer-reviewed science, not the speculation, not the theory, but the facts that tell us beyond any reasonable doubt. Number one, there's a field of energy that underlies all physical existence. That is a scientific fact. Mm-hmm. There is a field of energy from which all physical matter emerges. That is a scientific fact. Our bodies are part of that field. And we were born with the ability to communicate with this field in ways that we're only beginning to understand. We were born with the ability to communicate with the stuff that holds the matter of this universe together, the stuff that holds our bodies together. That is a scientific fact. The controversy in science is, to what degree do we have the ability to communicate with this field? To what degree may we initiate the healing of the cells in our bodies, or the peace in our communities, or between nations? That's the controversy, and scientists don't like the answer to the question of that controversy, because the answer is, it depends upon us and the focus that we choose to place into our communication with the field. So the book, The Divine Matrix, was released in 2008. It won a gold award, the Nautilus Book Award, for the best new science and cosmology book of 2008. It has won a number of other awards as well. The book Entanglement is actually based upon the screenplay that was developed from the book The Divine Matrix. The Divine Matrix was the science. And for many people, it's a little left brain. It's a little technical. What Entanglement tells us is that matter is connected always. And the way that the scientists really came to terms with this, in 1997, an experiment was conducted in Geneva, Switzerland. It is called the twin photon experiment. Scientists took a particle of matter, the stuff everything is made of, our bodies and the world. It's called a photon. One particle. They split it into two so that they had two identical photons, twins. Wow. They separated them by a distance of many miles. Then the experiment began. And what they found was that whatever happened to one of the photons in one location, the other acted as if it was having the same experience simultaneously. There was no lag time between the initiation of the experience and when the other one experienced it. So scientists have now arrived at the conclusion, and this is where this all comes together, that once matter is physically connected, even though it becomes physically separated, it is still linked energetically. Okay, so the photons physically separated, but there was an energy that still separated them or connected them. This is important for us because science tells us a long time ago the entire universe was compressed into the form of matter about the size of a single green pea. If you take all of the space out of the universe and compress the matter together, it only takes up the space of about one green pea. We were all connected. Everything was connected. During the Big Bang, when everything began to expand and the space was placed in between the elements, we believe that things are physically separate, but the experiments tell us that we are energetically connected. So we are connected to all things. That's a big idea, big concept. So the producers of the movie, they said, let's do this in a way that everyone can understand. So rather than taking two physical particles, they took twin brothers. Two brothers from the womb of the same mother. Two brothers have very different lives. One of them is in the battlefield of Iraq. The other one is in a university in the United States. And even though they are physically connected, physically separate, their energetic connection, I don't want to spoil the film, but their energetic connection allows them to communicate with one another in a way that saves one of the brothers' lives in the battlefield of Iraq. And it is because of the principle of entanglement that they were able to have the connection with no computers, no GPS, no cell phones. They know they've experienced this connection all of their lives. So that was the screenplay. The book, the novel then, was developed from the words of the screenplay and made into a full-length novel. And that's a long answer to a short question, but that's the history of how it came together.
That's a very interesting and complete answer. That it answered my my inquiry.
And I'm proud of both. I think these are Hollywood actors. The movie Entanglement is made for television. It's a 55-minute segment. It is part of a pilot project with two other segments. There are three altogether. And if this does well, it becomes a series on television, a made-for-television series in the States, based upon these scientific principles, exploring them in ways that are easy to understand. It makes sense.
Okay, can we buy these movies? Or are they,
yes, they're available wherever books and movies are sold. Our websites for our publisher, Hay House, is the one that actually put this together. They did a very beautiful job. These are Hollywood actors, very well done scripts, and some people cry, some people laugh. It's a powerful film.
Wow.
But it really helps to get this idea across that everything is connected, number one, in ways that we're only beginning to understand. Number two, that we were born speaking the language of this connection, and it is not a verbal language of words. It is the silent language of the human heart and our ability to create the feelings, the emotions that actually influence. So I'm not going to use the word control or manipulate, but they influence the fields that connect all things. Our ancestors understood this in their way, and now we're only beginning in recent times to understand it in ours.
Wow. Since you brought up the subject of the divine matrix, I'm going to ask you a far-out question concerning the divine matrix.
Far-out question, okay.
Yeah. In regard with the information conveyed in the book and the latest fundamental research in the field of quantum physics, and all the theories like holographic universe, holographic reality, would you go as far as to say that matter does not exist, as George Berkeley, the philosopher, hundreds of years ago, pretended?
Well, we have to say that matter exists. It is becoming the question of how we perceive that existence. All things exist. All possibilities exist as potential. Matter does not exist the way that we have been led to believe in the modern world. And it was Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, that actually made that statement. And it was the core of the book, The Divine Matrix. It was the core of the movie, Entanglement. What he said is matter, as we have been led to perceive it, does not exist. He said that underlying all physical matter is a field of energy. And he said we must assume behind this field of energy the existence of an intelligent and conscious mind. This intelligent and conscious mind is the matrix of all matter. So for people that saw the movie The Matrix, it was based upon Max Planck's ideas that there is another world that we cannot see from this perspective of where we are in this 3D world. We can't see it. There's an entire world that exists beyond our perceptions, but that world is what influences what happens in this world. And of course, the movie The Matrix was made in Hollywood, so they took that into the realm of an action film. A lot of action, a lot of fighting, good versus evil, those kinds of things. But it all was happening within this realm of experience that we can't see. And so I think matter certainly exists, but it probably doesn't exist the way we've been led to believe, is the solid, impenetrable barriers that we've been led to believe.
Since you brought up Max Planck, I'm going to talk about Niels Bohr, who I think is part of the reason why your latest book is called Deep Truth. Isn't it?
Niels Bohr, you know, it's interesting. When I write a book, what generally happens is a title is selected, and then the book is developed to support that title.
Do you choose the title?
Pardon me?
Do you choose the title?
I choose the title, and I write every word of my books. You know, I've learned many authors. I'm only recently learning that many authors have other people write the books for them, and that's okay if that's the way they'd like to do it. I think it's important for my readers to know that I have worked very hard for every word in that book is my word. So when I was writing the book Deep Truth, the book was almost complete and I had no title. And my publisher, every day they would call and say, "What's the name of this book? How can we advertise a book that has no name?" And I would wake up in the morning and say, "What will I call my book?" It was when I was reading a biography, I was researching a biography of Albert Einstein. And it was in a conversation that Albert Einstein was having with his friend and colleague, Niels Bohr, in the mid-20th century, in the 1940s. Now, 1940s, new scientific discoveries were being published almost every month. And those discoveries were changing the way that scientists thought about the world. And what they had once believed to be true about the world, the discoveries told them that those truths were no longer true, and the new discoveries became the new truths. And the way that Niels Bohr said this, and this is a quote he said to Albert Einstein, he said, "It is the hallmark of any deep truth that its negation also becomes a deep truth." So what he was saying is that when new discoveries tell us what we once thought was true is no longer true, the new discovery becomes the new deep truth. And I said that has to be the name of this book, because that's what this book is all about. The new scientific discoveries that change 150 years of thinking and the way we have been led to think of ourselves and our relationship to the world. And those new discoveries now become the new deep truths, although there is a reluctance in the mainstream media to share these truths. In mainstream documentaries, mainstream classrooms, mainstream textbooks, there is a reluctance and in some cases a resistance to share the new deep truths. Now I have to be very careful when I talk about this. It's not the teacher's fault, because the teachers are required by law to teach only what is approved in the curricula. And if the curriculum has not approved these new discoveries, even though they are scientifically accepted, they're not taught. So the essence of this is that we are teaching obsolete science to our young people on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're being left with the problems that we have created in our lifetime. They're being asked to solve the problems with an obsolete science that led to the problems to begin with. And this is where my passion comes from in this work. You might ask, why is there such a reluctance to share the discoveries? And there are a lot of reasons. Money is one of them. There's a scientific story of our relationship to the world that's 150 years old. It's in all the textbooks. It's in all the papers. It's in all the classrooms. It costs a lot of money to change that. Teachers, professors have dedicated their entire lives to teaching this story in one way or another. And for them, there is an ego, a matter of ego, about what they have taught in the past and what the new material is showing. From my perspective, we teach what we know to be true. in a moment in time. And when new discoveries tell us that what we once believed is no longer true, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our young people to share the new discoveries. Science is designed to be constantly updated. As new discoveries come to light, and they are proven, science must be updated with the new discoveries for science to serve us and to be honest and truthful. And if we do not allow that process, then we're not honoring ourselves with the best information to solve the crises that face us in our world today. So this is the essence of the book, Deep Truth.
Okay. If then the world is shaped by false scientific assumptions because we're not teaching, nobody's getting the real information, or at least it seems to be like
Incomplete information.
Could it also mean that the world is first and foremost shaped by false political power assumptions, like power, politics,
Well,
games?
that's a very good question, and this is where the rubber meets the road. It's where the rubber of our spiritual beliefs meets the road of the real world. And people have asked me, they said, Gregg, I thought you were going to talk only about spiritual things. And I asked them, what could be more spiritual than building a world around us that reflects the principles and the truths that we believe in our hearts, that we claim to be true? I think this is the great crisis that we face today, is putting into practice in real life, through the policies, through the laws, and the politics, if you will, the principles that create the world that reflects what we know to be true in our hearts. So for 150 years, false assumptions of science have told us that we're separate from our bodies. They've told us that we're separate from one another, that we're separate from our world, that history is linear. It's a one-time deal. History began here, we're at the top here, it happened once. We can't possibly learn anything from our past. Science has taught us, based on false assumptions of Charles Darwin, that the world and nature is based upon what Darwin himself called survival of the strongest, later interpreted as survival of the fittest. Darwin's language, survival of the strongest. It's a very dangerous way of thinking, because what it says, it leads us to believe that we must all fight for our piece of whatever pie we're talking about, whether it's the vital resources of fresh water or food, the way we share medicine in our world and technology, the way we help one another deal with climate change, all the corporations of the world, the global economic system that now is collapsing as you and I have this conversation.
True.
It's not only in crisis, it is collapsing right now, and it must, because it is based upon a model that is not sustainable in nature. Nature is not based upon a model of survival of the strongest, and the new science is telling us very, very clearly that nature is based on the model of what is called cooperation and mutual aid. So for 150 years, we have a civilization. We've solved our problems through war. We have delegated resources, vital resources, and helped one another through the difficult times based on this idea of survival of the strongest. The reason that so many systems are collapsing now is because those systems now have reached a wall where that principle is no longer sustainable. And if we try to solve the crises, the problems of today through the same thinking that led to them, we know where that will lead, because that's the world we have right now. So it's a tremendous opportunity to push the reset button and look at the way that we build corporations, look at the way that we conduct business in our world, look at the way we solve problems, the way we share resources, based upon what we now know is the true model of nature, mutual aid and cooperation. And will we do that is the question, and that's the question we're answering right now as we share this information. We're making those choices right now.
Yeah.
Are we on question number 2 of the list yet?
Yeah. No. We're arriving. Speaking about cooperation and competition, any thoughts, speculation concerning what could have driven human nature from the almost blissful state of cooperation to the one of competition? Because
here's what the best science of our time is telling us, and this is where the science helps us to understand what's real and what's not. That's the value of science. It can't tell us what to do with the information, but it gives us the facts. When we look at civilization, when I was in school, you were in school, most of our listeners were in school, we were taught that civilization is about 5,000 years old. It began in ancient Sumeria, Mesopotamia, 5,000, maybe 5,500 years ago. The problem is the data doesn't support that at all. Peer-reviewed archaeology is now pushing the date of advanced civilization back at least twice that old, into right around 13,000 years, into the end of the last ice age, advanced civilizations. So now the science is seeing that we have evidence of advanced civilizations in northern Peru, in Turkey, in India, in Egypt. It's not just one place, it's not an anomaly, it is a pattern, it is a cycle. Now here's why I'm sharing this in answer to the question. There's a mystery. All of these advanced civilizations have been found prior to 5,000 years old. The mystery is this: there's no evidence of any weapons, no evidence of the need to defend homes or cities, no evidence of walls, no evidence of moats, no weapons have been found, no evidence of large-scale war, no mass graves that you would expect to see after a large-scale war, no mutilated bodies from limbs being severed and axes in the heads of the skulls of the warriors. None of that. That all begins 5,000 years ago, interestingly, the beginning of what we call history. Now, that's the science. The indigenous oral traditions have an explanation for that. It's not science, but it's almost universal. And what they say is that we live in a cyclic world rather than a linear world, that civilization is cyclic. There are rises and falls of civilization. And that our civilization happened at the collapse of the one before ours, a time they called the Golden Age. Almost universally, it was called the time of the Golden Age, or the Age of Peace. And as the Age of Peace came to an end, our indigenous ancestors, whether we're talking about the Tibetans, who I've visited personally, or the indigenous elders of the shaman in Bolivia and Peru, the American Desert Southwest, and India, they all have a common story. And they say that 5,000 years ago, we call the beginning of history was actually the beginning of what they called a dark age of suffering and violence and war that would last for 5,000 years. It closes, that 5,000 year cycle closes when the Mayan calendar indicates the solstice, December 21st, 2012. So we are now living the last year of a 5,000 year cycle of darkness, war, and suffering. The question is, as the next cycle begins, do we perpetuate that cycle? Or is this the generation that makes the change? Is this the generation that chooses peace? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, because I believe this generation will turn its back on war as a way to solve our problems between nations. We're seeing it happen in places now where the armies of a country will not turn and fire upon their own people. That's a powerful sign that something big is happening now. So the answer to your question, competition and violence, it appears at the beginning of this 5,000 year cycle. Something happened, and I don't know exactly what it is, but war was developed as a habit. It's not human nature, it's a bad habit that we learned 5,000 years ago, and that suggests that it's something that we can unlearn. If a habit is acquired, then we can learn to heal that habit. And I think it takes one generation that must live the habit and then break the habit. That's this generation. That's where we are right now. That's the potential that lies before each of us right now.
Very interesting.
It is interesting, and it's not being taught in the classrooms. Our young people are being taught. There's actually a textbook that says, first sentence of the textbook, and I talk about this in the book Deep Truth, it says that war is like, it's human nature, it's like commerce, it's something that all humans do. That's
it's like the market.
It's the first sentence in the book. It leads young people to believe it's natural to have violent competition between one another. So now we have an entire generation that is being raised believing that war is the way to solve our problems. Our job is to change that. And I believe it can be done. And I believe it can be done in one generation, and that's hopefully what we're doing right now.
A couple of months ago, I heard you recall on radio an event that happened during one of your trip in France, near Paris. What is Coherence building, and what is its ultimate implication?
Sure. Well, what the best science of our time is showing us is that there is a field of energy that connects all humans through the human heart. It's the magnetic field of the earth that links all humans through the human heart. And one of the reasons we know about this is because of the tragedy of September 11th. When 9/11 happened, the satellites that were measuring the magnetic fields of the earth registered a tremendous increase in the strength of those magnetic fields. In the presence of a strong magnetic field, humans become very close, less aggressive, more cooperative. And if you remember, after 9/11, the world was very close, at least for a while.
Exactly.
We were like a family on this planet because those magnetic fields were strong. Scientists believe it was the outpouring of millions of people, their heart-based emotions in response to 9/11, to what they saw on the televisions. They were having a heart-based experience spontaneously in response to 9/11. And that was what temporarily strengthened the fields. The question is, does it take a tragedy for us to open our hearts and strengthen the fields? Right after 9/11, I was in Saint-Germain, a small village in the outskirts of Paris. We had 3,500 people in a room for a seminar. And there was a man in the audience early in the morning. He was very angry. Security came in, and they wanted to kick him out. And I said, there are no accidents. Don't kick him out completely.
Okay.
I said, ask him to stand in the hall. And for about 5 minutes, we led the audience, the 3,499 people remaining in the audience, in an experience to create coherence in the room similar to what was created on Earth in response to 9/11. We opened our hearts in very precise ways that are documented in the traditions of the shaman, in the Buddhist traditions, in the traditions of the monasteries of Tibet, in the Christian traditions, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the books that were edited from the modern Christian Bible, such as the Gospel of Thomas, for example. Very clear instructions on how to move from our minds into our hearts. We bring those together in a scientific way, in a way that can be measured, and in 3 minutes created a field of coherence in the room. We brought the angry man back in.
He didn't know, the guy.
He didn't know what was happening. We brought him back in, and I asked him through a translator, and we gave him a microphone, and I said, please share with me your experience. And he came into the room, and he had what you heard on the radio I was talking about. He had a very odd look on his face. And he said, this is so strange. He said, in my mind, I know the reason for my anger. He said, but I can't feel the anger. I can't feel the emotion of the anger in my heart. And he started to laugh. He said it was such a strange feeling. The reason I share that story, September 11th told us that we have access to the field, that we can communicate with it. The experience in France told us that when people come together intentionally and create that field, that the anger, the emotion of anger, we can't access the emotion of anger when we're in that field. What happened in the room in Saint-Germain on that day is possible for a planet. It's very difficult for a leader of a nation to feel the anger in his heart or her heart and declare war on a neighbor. It's very difficult for that to happen if we're not feeling it. And we have the ability to create that experience, and what science now calls it is heart-brain coherence. And there are very precise techniques I share in the workshops. I'm in Montreal this weekend. We'll do it this weekend. Direct experience in the room, the techniques that meld the best science of today with the spiritual traditions of our past in ways that are very accessible, very easy, very tangible. So the reason for me sharing the story was precisely for that. We know it's possible to create a field of coherence. And in the presence of coherence, personally, our bodies are healthier, our immune systems are stronger, our anti-aging hormones kick into overdrive when we experience heart-brain coherence. Beyond our bodies, it creates peace and an environment of cooperation and less aggression in the world. And if we were ever going to do that in the world, this is a very good time because of where our world is right now. The leaders of every nation the CEOs of every corporation. There is no them and us. There is a we in the presence of that field. And all of us can communicate with that field. So it doesn't impose our will. It creates a field where aggression is difficult, where cooperation is supported. And if we can do that, as we make the choices and the decisions in response to the crises of our day, and I believe that is where we open our hearts in a very real way, and that's where we create a new world, a new world. So this is important. It's not about fighting against the things we don't like. It's about supporting the things that we do like. And Buckminster Fuller said this very beautifully. Buckminster Fuller said, "You'll never change the world by fighting against the things you don't like." He said, if you want to change the world, show the world something that makes the old way obsolete.
Absolutely.
Heart-based coherence, cooperation makes war obsolete. I think that's our best bet.
By the way, if you're a fan of Buckminster Fuller, here in Montreal, we have the geodesic dome,
Yeah, I know.
what he built that
I know you do.
it's turned into a museum now. The coherence field, the field you're talking about, is it similar to what you talked 2 or 3 years ago in what's happening in China? You know, they're chanting, somebody has a cancer, the energy cures. Could it be similar in effect on someone if we develop?
The short answer is that all fields are connected.
Okay.
And as we learn the language of the fields, whether it's a personal healing between the cells of our bodies or it's a global cooperation between nations, it's the same language. Heart-based coherence sets up an environment that supports healing in our bodies, peace and cooperation between individuals at the family dinner table, in our communities, between nations. It's all the same field and all the same language, and it all comes back. It bridges the best science of our day with the most cherished spiritual traditions of our past, and that's what brings us full circle. I think it's probably a good place to end our interview today too, because it brings us full circle. Yeah, I'm gonna save my voice for the program.
Perfect.
It's
Well,
been
Gregg,
30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's been at least
Thanks a
30
lot,
minutes.
Gregg. And once again, welcome to Montreal, and we wish you a nice trip here.
I am honored to be here. Thank you for having my beautiful family. Yeah. Hope you all enjoyed the program. Come see next time I come to Montreal.